of Worship, your source for commentary and discussion on worship, theology, and culture. I'm your host, Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on the Act of Worship podcast. This is Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones. I hope and pray that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, that hopefully you did not eat too much as I did. But I have an excuse for that. My brother and I both decided to take care of Thanksgiving this year for my family instead of my parents. Some of you know that my dad recently finished about 6 months of chemo, and so we wanted to just take care of everything for them, and we ended up eating too much in the process. So I hope you didn't do that, but either way, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. And so it is good to be back. It has been a couple of weeks since I've shared a podcast. I had some computer issues last week and I didn't get around to it, and so we are back at it. My plan is to have 2 more podcasts after this. We'll see how that goes. Maybe I come up with one more. I always have a lot to talk about, but right now my plan is to have 2 more after this and then break for the Advent and Christmas season, and then sometime in early 2019 get back to it again. And so today we are continuing to discuss worship-related issues, theological-related issues, and cultural-related issues. And today I am talking about a theological issue. And that is the issue of making disciples. And my point in this podcast is going to be that the imperative in the Great Commission is to make disciples above going. Mike Breen recently posted a blog centering around why the missional movement will fail. In fact, that was the title of his blog. And when I first read those words, I was a little bit shocked. But the author makes the point that radical disciple making is the church's call above going. Mike Breen says this. He says, we took 30 days and examined the Twitter conversations happening. We discovered that there are between 100 and 150 times as many people talking about mission as there are discipleship. To be clear, that's 100 to 1. And we are a group of people addicted to and obsessed with the work of the kingdom with little to no idea how to be with the king. End quote. In the Great Commission, Matthew 28:19 through 20, by the way, if you're like me and grew up in a Protestant church, particularly a Baptist church, that was drilled into you, the Great Commission. Now hear me, that is not the greatest commandment. Jesus said the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So the Great Commission is not and should not be confused with the greatest commandment. But it is the Great Commission and is what we are called to do. But Jesus commands his followers at the end of Matthew chapter 28, when he is ascending, he commands his followers to go. But the imperative comes after the word go, and he subsequently commands his people to make disciples. In other words, the point of going, and I think indeed the end means of missions, is to glorify God by forming people who love and obey him. And so the imperative is often wrongly placed on going rather than disciple making. In the Greek context of the Great Commission, the implication is that going is not a separate thing. In other words, it's not just going to make disciples, but it is making disciples as you are going. The Greek implies not just going, but as you are going. In other words, whatever you are doing in your daily rhythms of life, whether that is work or school or your family life, whatever it may be, make disciples. Making disciples then is a part of our daily walk. And so I want to suggest today, I don't want to suggest, but I need to suggest that we have missed the point of the Great Commission because we have missed the point of a disciple and the Christian life altogether. And so there are two glaring aspects, I think, of our call that we have missed. First of all, we've missed the point of Jesus' command. In the Great Commission, Jesus' command is really rooted in discipleship, not missions. In fact, the act and ministry of missions is merely a derivative of the entire point of Christianity and indeed our entire lives. The glory of God. That is the point from which everything else stems. And so by placing the imperative on go rather than make disciples, we effectively miss the point of Jesus' command. Now, in saying all this, I do not intend to diminish going and missions. Missions is a passion of mine. But we have to have the right motivation and the right foundation, which is glorifying God by making disciples. The New Testament exhibited a unity between evangelism, discipleship, and Christian formation that provided a sequence of ministry. Robert Webber suggests that this ministry sequence moved new converts through stages of spiritual growth. The Greek word for disciple is matateo, and it implies an action as a student or a learner or a follower. But it is active in nature. And so as disciples of Jesus Christ, we're not only called to follow him and to learn from him and with him, but to also play a role in forming other people who do the same, who follow and obey Jesus Christ. And so when Jesus said to go, his followers, they would have understood his command to equate to making disciples as they were going in their work and their education, their family life, and the like. And so while many churches, local churches, strongly focus on missions, the point of missions is to make disciples. And if we're not making disciples and we're merely helping people practically, in other words, we're building decks and repairing roofs, those are good things. But if that's all we're doing, we are participating in exercises of futility. And so no matter the intent, no matter how good an action might be or seem to be, anything that does not point people to Jesus Christ as the author and the perfecter of faith, and indeed the treasure, the greatest treasure above all, it's a waste of time. And so if the point of missions is simply to do good works or to save people from hell even, we have missed the point. Should we go? Absolutely. We should go. But as we are going, we should continuously realize our call to make disciples, not converts. And what is the test of discipleship? How do you know when someone is a disciple? It's service. Are they serving in the local church? We need to ask ourselves if we are forming people who just make good decisions but neglect to serve the Lord in the local church. If we're doing that, then we have not only we've only executed half of the Great Commission, if even that, because making disciples is that from which everything else stems in Jesus' command. So we don't need to miss the point of the command and participate in futility, but we need to participate in making radical disciples who abandon all for the sake of Jesus Christ. So the first glaring thing, I think, the glaring mistake we have made is we miss the point of Jesus' command. The second thing we do is we miss the point and the meaning of a disciple. What I mean by that is, in the context of Jesus' words in the Great Commission, a disciple is more than a student. That's often how we think of a disciple, a student or a learner. But in this context, when Jesus is speaking to his followers, it is someone who radically obeys him and follows him despite the consequences that may come. The people to whom Jesus directly spoke in Matthew 28:19 through 20 They dwelled in a land and in a day when Christianity was really very unpopular and it required sacrifice, often their very lives. And so they would have understood the concept of discipleship to mean more than just learning. Because if someone learns but they don't obey and they're not changed, then the gospel has not taken its full effect in their life. A disciple then is someone who radically follows and obeys Jesus Christ. And so if we obey Jesus, going is a non-issue because we are obeying him as we are going. And we really need to latch on to that concept of as you are going, not just go, as in that's a separate thing. One day I will go. No, you go every day. You leave your house, you go to the grocery store, you go to on vacation, whatever you are doing, wherever you are going, that is your go. That is what you are doing. And so someone who obeys Jesus on a constant basis, they are doing that as they are going. And someone who does that makes disciples as they go. In other words, as they work, as they study, as they love, and as they participate in their daily activities. And so a disciple does not act only on gratitude or self-satisfaction, except that that satisfaction is found in Jesus Christ. But what they do is they are satisfied in Jesus, and therefore obedience comes naturally. A disciple is first pleased with and in God above anything or anyone else, and then secondly, they are formed in obedience to Christ. Think about this. As we obey Christ, we are being formed as part of our sanctification process. Yes, we obey, and that is the result of our formation. But as we obey, we are continuously being further formed. And so the point of being a disciple is not to roll up your sleeves and take on the world no matter how difficult it is, but is to be completely satisfied in Jesus despite any and all circumstances. And from that satisfaction, obedience and following is yielded. A disciple is not just someone who learns from someone, but they truly follow them and obey them. And so we shouldn't spend our time trying to convert people who do not want to be converted. The Holy Spirit is the one who calls people to salvation. So our job is to preach the gospel in everything we do and to take the name of Jesus Christ to those who don't know him. But if we stop with going and we neglect making disciples, we don't employ our God-given call to make disciples of all nations. Going is really a derivative of making disciples. Why do we go? To make disciples. We don't make disciples to go. We go to make disciples. And even in the context of as you are going, what is the point of everything you do in your life? To glorify God by making disciples. That's at your work, that's in your school, that's in everything. So the point of going, or the point of as you are going, is to make disciples. And so we miss the point of Jesus' command by not making disciples, but by placing the imperative on going. And we miss the point by not realizing what a disciple is. We are called to make disciples. We are called to be disciples. And what's the proof of discipleship? Radical obedience. How do we know if we ourselves are disciples? Radical obedience. And we could form many excuses for not radically obeying Jesus Christ, but nothing suffices. God can do more with the cup that we're given than we could ever do on our own with the limitless sea. And so no matter how difficult something may seem, we should not cease to obey the command of Christ by merely going. If we are just going and going on mission trips or even going long term as a missionary, and all we're doing is going, but we are not making disciples. We're preaching the gospel maybe, but our goal is not making disciples, then we've failed in our task. So we need to make disciples who are satisfied in God and who honor him in daily radical obedience. The local church needs to realize that without the goal of making disciples, missions will fail. It doesn't matter how good your intent is. We must make disciples. So hopefully that's some food for thought for you, this post-Thanksgiving Act of Worship podcast. And again, we're going to have 2 more after this. So I hope this has been helpful and hopefully can help you some more in the next few weeks. Until next week, I hope you have a great one. Thanks for listening. This is Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones.